And I want to see the right justice that you see fit, Judge, and I put it in God's hands.
Prosecutors say Jacobs intentionally ran Watson over with her car after the victim tried to break up an argument between the defendant and her sister. The judge sentenced Jacob to up to 9 years behind bars.
Before sunrise in Youngstown, Ohio, police officers step out of their cruiser into a yard lit only by their headlights and the faint glow of street lamps. A car sits lodged in the grass, dark, silent, its engine ticking as it cools. And beneath that car lies a man. 30-year-old Nathaniel Watson is pinned underneath the vehicle, motionless, trapped in a position no human body should ever be found in. Officers shout for help. EMTs rush in, hands shaking as they work to free him. And standing only a few feet away from the scene is the woman who ran him over. Her name is Shanae T. Jacobs, 32 years old, intoxicated, distraught, and insisting between broken breaths that this was all a terrible accident. But when investigators look up, when they review the footage, when they study the path of the headlights captured on surveillance cameras, they learn that nothing about what happened on South Schenley Avenue was accidental. Hours earlier, Nathaniel and Shanae were a couple, complicated, imperfect, but familiar to one another. By dawn, he was dead beneath her vehicle. A relationship argument didn't just escalate, it became lethal. And behind that deadly moment sits a story of trauma, grief, alcohol, and a lifetime of emotional wounds that were never treated, never confronted, never healed. Nathaniel was known to his family as a joyful, loving presence, the glue of their household. But that morning, as officers stood over his body, no one could piece together how an argument, a night of drinking, and a moment of rage had ended with such irreversible violence. And Shanae, haunted by childhood abuse, drowning in addiction, and triggered on the anniversary of her best friend's murder, made a decision that would destroy two families forever. This isn't just a story about a crime. It's a story about a catastrophic failure of emotional control, fueled by trauma and alcohol, culminating in intentional vehicular violence. In this episode of The Crime Anatomy, we will break down the exact timeline of the night Nathaniel died, the surveillance footage that contradicted everything Shanae first told police, the trauma and alcohol dependency that built up over years and exploded on October 15th, the moment-by-moment escalation that turned a domestic dispute into a fatal act, the courtroom revelations that exposed the truth, and the lessons this case offers for preventing tragedy when trauma, addiction, and conflict collide. Before we go deeper, a quick question for you. Have you ever seen alcohol turn a small argument into something dangerous? Drop your answer below. Your stories help drive awareness in cases like this. Welcome to The Crime Anatomy. We uncover the real stories behind the nation's most disturbing cases. If stories like this matter to you, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you never miss an episode. Now let's humanize the man whose life was taken long before he had the chance to defend himself. But Nathaniel Watson was far more than the devastating moment that took his life. Public records reveal only fragments of who he was. He was 30 years old, a young man from the Youngstown, Ohio area. We don't have full biographies or interviews outlining his dreams, his profession, his childhood, or his ambitions. But what we do know comes from the people who loved him, people who stood in a courtroom and spoke through tears about the son, cousin, and friend they lost. Nathaniel's mother described him as a joy to be around. His cousin called him our glue. Not many people get described that way. Most families have someone who pulls everyone together. The one who checks in, who shows up, who smooths conflicts or brings light into a room. For Nathaniel's family, he was that person. These aren't generic lines. These are the words of people who had to stand in court and look at the woman who killed him, trying to explain, in only a few sentences, what they no longer have. A family doesn't use the word glue lightly. Nathaniel's death didn't just end a life. It ripped a thread out of a family structure. His mother spoke about an emotional void, one that cannot be filled. His cousin spoke about the ripple effect, how gatherings feel emptier, how the center of their family's balance had been taken from them. Even with limited public details, it's clear that Nathaniel was loved deeply. He wasn't perfect. No one is, but he was someone worth fighting for, someone worth remembering outside the shadow of the tragedy that took his life. And this matters, because Nathaniel didn't die in a random act of violence. He died trying to walk away from an argument. He died after trying to intervene and calm the tension between the woman he cared for and her sister. He died because he did what so many of us would do: try to de-escalate, step away, clear the air. He should have made it home. He should have lived. Instead, he became the victim of a collision between someone else's trauma, alcohol, and rage. Nathaniel is the emotional center of this case because his role in the final moments was simple yet tragic. He tried to walk away. He tried to avoid conflict. He tried to remove himself from a heated situation. And yet, his attempt to step away did not save him. That contrast between peace-seeking behavior and a violent end creates the emotional tension that viewers feel in their chest from the very beginning. It sets the stakes for the rest of the story. When trauma and alcohol take over, even the person trying to do the right thing isn't always safe. Before we continue, let me ask you something. If someone you love was in a heated argument or dangerous situation, would you trust the people around them to de-escalate? Or would you feel the need to step in yourself? Let me know your thoughts below. Now let's move deeper into the life of the woman behind the wheel. To understand what happened on the morning of October 15th, 2023, we have to walk back, not just hours, but years. Because Shanae Jacobs did not wake up that day a stable woman who suddenly snapped. She was a person carrying layers upon layers of trauma that she never treated, never confronted, and never allowed herself to heal from. Those wounds didn't excuse her actions, but they shaped the world she was living in long before she climbed behind the wheel of that car. According to court testimony and statement from her family, Shanae was sexually abused by a relative when she was young. The exact age isn't documented publicly, but records describe it happening during her formative years. Pain that early doesn't disappear. It doesn't fade. It imprints. Childhood abuse doesn't just harm the moment. It rewires everything that comes after. Trust, fear, emotional regulation, relationships, coping mechanisms. And for Shanae, this trauma was never meaningfully addressed. She refused counseling. She avoided professional help. She carried the weight alone, and that weight followed her into adulthood. A decade before Nathaniel's death, Shanae faced another trauma: the murder of one of her closest friends in 2013. This loss shattered her. Family members later testified that this death, violent, unexpected, traumatic, became a turning point for her, one she never recovered from. Every year, the anniversary reopened the wound. And the night Nathaniel died, it wasn't just any night. It was the anniversary of that murder. That detail matters not to justify anything, but to understand the emotional storm she was walking into. A grieving person may seek therapy. Shanae did not. She avoided every suggestion for counseling. Her family tried to intervene. She refused. She lived in a cycle of mourning without healing. And unresolved grief does not stay quiet. It grows. It festers. It compounds. Her trauma became a silent pressure building behind every new experience in her life. When emotional wounds are ignored, many people reach for something, anything to numb the pain. For Shanae, that numbing agent was alcohol. Her family testified that she drank heavily for years. Bars, after-hour spots, long nights, emotional instability tied to drinking. Over time, alcohol didn't just become comfort. It became a dependency, a ritual, a way to drown memories she refused to face. And when you pour alcohol on untreated trauma, the mixture becomes volatile, unpredictable, lethal. By the time October 14th rolled into October 15th, Shanae was grieving her friend's murder anniversary, remembering her childhood abuse, intoxicated after visiting multiple bars, emotionally unstable, carrying years of unaddressed trauma. That combination didn't excuse her actions, but it made the night far more explosive than anyone realized. And Nathaniel walked directly into the center of that storm. On the night of October 14th, Shanae and Nathaniel went out drinking. They visited multiple bars and then went to after-hours venues. By the time they arrived at Shanae's sister's home early that morning, both were intoxicated. But Shanae, by her own admission, had consumed a significant amount of alcohol. She admitted in court later, I didn't think alcohol was a problem that could lead to something like this. But that night, alcohol didn't just contribute. It was a catalyst. Inside the home, a fight broke out between Shanae and her sister. We don't know the details. Public record doesn't specify the cause. But we do know that emotions were high, alcohol was flowing, and tension escalated fast. Nathaniel stepped in, tried to calm the situation. This moment is important. Nathaniel wasn't the aggressor. He wasn't trying to escalate anything. He wasn't involved in the initial conflict. He was the peacemaker. But when emotions mix with substance abuse, even a peacemaker can become a target of misdirected rage. Surveillance footage from the sisters' home captured the next moments. Nathaniel walking away along the sidewalk. Shanae following him outside, her yelling and hurling insults as he walked off. He wasn't confronting her. He wasn't fighting. He was leaving. This is where viewers feel the tension crush their chest. The knowledge that a man walking away from conflict trying to de-escalate would be seconds from the most tragic moment of his life. Shanae got into her car. In every violent crime, there is a moment where someone could have stopped. A moment where the story could have ended quietly. This was that moment. She could have sat in that car and calmed down. She could have called someone. She could have driven home to a friend's place, anywhere. Instead, she turned the key. She put the car in motion. She made a decision that could not be undone. Remember, a vehicle becomes a weapon when pointed at a human body. A nearby homeowner's surveillance camera captured the fatal movement. Police later testified. The car's headlights veered off the street. The path wasn't straight. It wasn't sudden or unavoidable. It was directed toward the sidewalk. It was intentional. This wasn't an unavoidable accident. This wasn't a miscalculation. This wasn't a skid. It was a deliberate turn off the street and onto the sidewalk when Nathaniel was walking. In that instant, a 3,000-pound vehicle became a lethal instrument. When police arrived, the scene was chilling. Nathaniel Watson was under the car, pinned on the lawn. Shanae was standing only feet away, intoxicated, distraught. Emergency responders fought to save Nathaniel. They pulled him from under the vehicle. They attempted life-saving measures. They could not revive him. Nathaniel was pronounced dead. A man who tried to walk away from conflict died under the wheels of someone who could not walk away from hers. At first, Shanae told police, "He jumped in front of my car." But investigators compared that statement with the footage, and the footage did not lie. Later, under questioning, she admitted the truth. She intentionally ran him over. This is the turning point in our story. A moment where blame can no longer be blurred. A moment where trauma, alcohol, grief, and rage crystallized into an act of irreversible violence. 2 lives ended that night. One physically, one legally. Before we move into the investigation and court proceedings, I want to hear your thoughts. Do you believe this tragedy started on the road that night or years earlier? With unaddressed trauma and addiction? Share your perspective in the comments. Your insights matter more than you realize. After Nathaniel's death, Youngstown police faced 2 competing narratives. Shanae's first claim: he jumped in front of the car. The surveillance footage: a vehicle veering off the street and directly toward him. In every case where alcohol, emotion, and trauma collide, investigators rely on something that cannot cry, cannot lie, and cannot reshape its story. Video: police obtained 2 critical recordings. Footage from Shanae's sister's home captured the argument leaving the house, showed Nathaniel walking along the sidewalk, recorded Shanae following him, screaming, hurling insults. Footage from a neighboring home captured her vehicle pulling onto the road and then veering sharply off it, headlights angling toward the sidewalk. Impact moment inferred from light trajectory and movement. This second video is what changed everything. Investigators testified that the headlights did not remain aligned with the street. They didn't continue straight. They turned. They deviated. They pursued. No amount of intoxication could create that kind of directional shift by accident. A car does not swerve itself into a person. That video didn't just contradict her initial claim. It dismantled it. Car path analysis is straightforward. If a victim jumps in front, the car stays aligned with the road. If a driver is surprised, there is hesitation. brake lights, skid marks, swerving away from danger. None of those signs were present. Instead, the footage shows a decisive leftward turn off the street, movement directly toward the sidewalk. No visible attempt to correct or avoid. This was not panic, not confusion, not a tragic misstep. It was a choice. And in violent vehicular crimes, the direction of the car is often the clearest witness. Surveillance footage doesn't care about your fears, your trauma, your drunken haze. It records, it preserves, it testifies. And in this case, the cameras sealed the narrative. Nathaniel was walking away. Shanae followed him in her vehicle. She veered off the road and struck him. The truth was undeniable. To the public, a crime ends at the moment of death. But inside a courtroom, that moment is only the beginning. It must be dissected, chronicled, classified, and matched with the most appropriate law. And in this case, the legal journey was as layered as the trauma behind it. Right after her arrest, Shanae was charged with murder, felonious assault, aggravated vehicular assault, domestic violence. A judge set her bond at $750,000, reflecting the severity of the act and the evidence that indicated intention. She did not go home. She did not walk free while awaiting trial. She remained in jail. Because in the eyes of the law, striking someone with a vehicle, especially while intoxicated, is among the most serious forms of assault. At the early November hearing, prosecution laid out the surveillance evidence, her initial false explanation, her later admission, her level of intoxication, the deliberate swerve off the road, the context of the argument beforehand. The judge reviewed the facts and ruled probable cause for murder. This single ruling moved the case up to a county grand jury, where higher charges and more serious sentencing options were on the table. Legal cases are rarely linear. They are strategic, layered, and influenced by intent, evidence, intoxication, trauma history, prior criminal record, cooperation, remorse, and the willingness of the state to negotiate. By August 2024, Shanae accepted a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter. The state dropped the murder charge, felonious assault charge, aggravated vehicular assault charge, domestic violence charge. This plea acknowledges two things at once. She killed him intentionally, but the killing occurred in a highly charged emotional escalation rather than premeditation. Voluntary manslaughter sits between murder and reckless homicide, acknowledging intent without planning. On September 16, 2024, the court delivered the final sentence, 6 to 9 years in prison, 2 to 5 years of post-release control. In her statement, Shanae addressed the court. She admitted she was heavily intoxicated. She said she had no idea alcohol could lead to such tragedy. She expressed remorse and trauma. She vowed to give up alcohol entirely. She completed substance abuse and anger management programs while incarcerated.
I truly never meant for any of this to happen.
While reading her apology letter to the family, Jacobs took accountability for her actions, expressing deep regret.
I love Nathaniel more than words can express. It hurts me to the core to know that I have caused you eternal pain from this.
Courtroom remorse is always a delicate moment. Viewers may question sincerity, but the law evaluates actions, not feelings. Her words did not bring Nathaniel back, but they did paint a picture of a woman who knew she had destroyed 2 families, including her own. Victim impact statements are some of the most painful moments in any sentencing. Nathaniel's mother and cousin spoke. Their voices carried grief so heavy it filled the courtroom. His cousin said he was our glue. His mother said he was a joy to be around. But there was something else, something unexpected, woven through their pain. Forgiveness. They offered compassion to the woman who killed him, not because they excused her, not because they could ever forget, but because they needed to move forward without hate. Their forgiveness did not minimize his death. It magnified his character. It showed who he must have been to raise such grace out of such devastation. In cases like this, do you believe trauma and addiction should influence sentencing, or should the act itself be the only measure? Let me know what you think. Your perspective adds depth to these discussions.
Anderson spoke about the loss of her son.
He was such a good young man, a good baby.
She said she forgives Jacobs and that she's relying on her faith to get her through.
I never thought I would have to say bye. But it's not bye. I know God is in control, but I miss him.
When you step back from the details of the case, one question looms larger than all the rest. Could this have been prevented? And the painful truth is that yes, on multiple levels, this tragedy could have been avoided. Not because anyone had a crystal ball, and not because anyone could have predicted the exact moment a car would leave the street, but because the ingredients of this explosion were present for years, not addressed, not treated, not resolved, and on the wrong night, with enough alcohol, enough unresolved pain, and enough emotional volatility. They came together like a match and gasoline. Let's break down the core themes that this case shows with brutal honesty. In millions of households across America, arguments happen every day. Partners fight, siblings yell, emotions flare. But most of these disagreements end with time, distance, or someone stepping outside to cool off. In this case, that exact cooling off behavior is what Nathaniel tried to do. He walked away. But what made this situation uniquely dangerous were three elements. One, alcohol. Both individuals had been drinking heavily. Shanae, by her own admission, was intoxicated to the point that her judgment was impaired and her emotional control was thin. Alcohol doesn't create new problems. It amplifies the ones already there. 2, emotional instability. Shanae was triggered on a horrific anniversary, the murder of her best friend 10 years earlier. Grief anniversaries are known psychological danger points. Combine that with childhood abuse trauma, relationship stress, and untreated depression, and you get a vulnerable emotional state. 3, access to a lethal tool, a car, a 3,000-plus pound vehicle that becomes a weapon the moment intention points it at a human target. You can break a plate in anger. You can slam a door. But when you get behind the wheel, emotionally impaired, everything becomes deadly. This is the lesson. In an argument, if alcohol is involved, no one should be driving, not even to cool off, not even to leave the scene, not even for a moment. Alcohol, rage, and a running engine are a fatal combination. Trauma compounds. When one wound goes untreated, the next one lands twice as hard. And the next, and the next. A person can look fine for years. They can go to work, laugh with friends, celebrate birthdays. But then something triggers them, an anniversary, a memory, a fight. And everything they buried comes roaring back. This doesn't excuse behavior. It explains the instability that made the situation combustible. Had Shanae received trauma-informed care earlier in life, Nathaniel might still be alive. Had she sought treatment for alcoholism sooner, she might not have gotten behind the wheel that night. The lesson is hard but necessary. What you don't heal will eventually spill onto someone else. And sometimes it destroys the person who least deserves it. Shanae's family tried to intervene. They urged her to get counseling. They pointed out patterns of drinking. They tried to support her through grief. She refused help every time. Here's the painful part. You cannot force someone to heal. You cannot force them into therapy. And you cannot make them put down the bottle. One of the most heartbreaking truths about this case is that no one wins. Nathaniel's family lost a loving son, cousin, and friend, the glue that held them together. Shanae's family lost the version of her they hoped she would become. One family mourns a life taken. The other mourns a life thrown away. This dual grief is common in tragedies rooted in trauma and addiction. There is no victory, only loss, only broken pieces. Was justice served? Shanae received 6 to 9 years in prison, 2 to 5 years of post-release control for killing a man with her car intentionally. Nathaniel Watson did not deserve to die. No sentence changes that fact. No courtroom speech resurrects him. The best we can do now is learn. Nathaniel may not have left behind a public biography. He may not have had interviews or a documented life story. But the words of those who loved him say enough. He was a joy to be around. He was our glue. That is a legacy. A man whose presence made others feel stable. a man whose absence left him broken. Nathaniel deserved to grow old. He deserved more birthdays. He deserved the peaceful end he tried to create when he walked away. And it is our responsibility as storytellers and viewers to remember him for the life he lived, not just the way he died. Before we close this episode, I want to ask you something. Have you ever watched someone drown in their own trauma? Have you ever seen a friend or loved one drink to escape something they refuse to talk about? Have you ever felt helpless watching two people you care about destroy each other? If Nathaniel's story stirred something in you, if it made you angry or sad or reflective, don't let that feeling fade. Share this video. Tell someone about his story. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the Crime Anatomy, where we break down cases not just to recount tragedy, but to understand it, learn from it, and prevent it from happening again. Nathaniel Watson deserved a long life. He deserved peace. He deserved to walk away and make it home safely. May we honor him by recognizing the danger signs in our own lives and in the lives of the people we love before it's too late.